Welcome to the Hellmouth, everyone. I am Dylan Randazzo. If you're watching as part of our subathon spectacular, please continue to comment along. I'm sure I'm getting a lot of comments right now as this airs. This is the only big pre-taped, edited portion of the subathon because I wanted to make this as perfect and as well eloquated as I can because this is a video that has been quite literally years in the making, and I am so excited. A few of you picked up on the hints. A few of you picked up on the clues. You guys did follow my time codes in my subathon announcement video and kind of picked it apart to realize that I was teasing a Buffy the Vampire Slayer video, but little did you know what type of Buffy the Vampire Slayer video I'd be doing, and that I would be reviewing the entire series. Now, a few more things to maybe melt your brain a little bit and make you very, very surprised is that I haven't just seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because how could I review it if I haven't seen it? I have seen it. But not only that, I've seen it 3 times. I know there are a lot of people listening who are like, wait a sec, Dill's watched this 3 times, because a lot of you were in a watch-along group with me, watching along Buffy from season 1. We made it about halfway through season 2, and the watch-alongs were really fun. I did it with a small group of people. I'll shout you out right now. Chad and Carrie and Stacy and Matt and JD and Carly. It was a really fun time watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The only problem is that I feel like as we got further into the show and things started developing further and further and bigger moments were happening and bigger moments were coming, I felt like the chat atmosphere for a first watch of a show that is so detail-oriented and also so meaningful to so many different people is probably not the best way to watch it. And I know that's really sad to hear from fans that do love it and did want to see my reactions in real, authentic time. But the truth of the matter was, a big moment would happen, we'd take it to the chat, and then 5 minutes later, I'd look up and I'd missed 5 minutes of stuff because I was engaging with the chat. And there's something to be said about chatting along and talking about these shows with your people and getting to really share all your coherent thoughts as much as you can. But there's also a detriment in the fact that you can't just be with the show and sit with the show, and you can't really go into the show blind, because you have people saying, oh my god, a big episode's coming up next, or oh my god, just wait for the next scene, and you know something big is going to happen. And that's not to fault my friends. I love my friends dearly. You've seen a lot of them on this subathon so far. You're going to see a lot of them later. But for this show, especially because it is so meaningful to my friends, I wanted to take the time on my own and watch it. So after we got halfway through season 2, I kind of called it off. I said, guys, I need to finish this on my own. And for a year, almost a year, I watched very slowly until the end of like season 3. And then just things got very busy, very hectic. And then I got the call that I was in a movie, Band on the Run, which I'm also very, very proud of right here. Band on the Run. With a co-star, Larry Bagby, who actually played Larry in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it inspired me to want to go back and continue, because I was like, I'm going to be working with a co-star of Buffy. I don't want to look like an idiot and not know what I'm talking about when discussing the show with him. And he was someone that I shared a lot of scenes with, so he was someone I got very close with on the set, became a good friend with, and wanted to talk Buffy, wanted to talk about his relationships to the actors, you know, his friendship with Seth Green. It was very interesting to watch the show with the absence of opinion, because there were certain moments that I was discovering that I didn't see coming at all, and I was very astounded by. And I think that's why Buffy has continued to become such a cult favorite, is because a lot of people have grasped onto certain moments that are so meaningful to them, whether it be about sexuality or loss of a parent, or just the female empowerment aspect of Buffy in general. And it's really great to see these surprising moments that in the moment I was like, wow, this must have meant so much at the time when it aired, but also I am watching it decades removed, and I'm feeling affected by it, which shows its power. And I think the biggest thing about Buffy that I think is very admirable is that fan base, is the love that came from that cast, from that crew, and from the people who watch it. And I know stuff has come out about the creator. I'm not even going to name him by name. I don't think it's worth giving him that spotlight. But also, I think it's important to note that a lot of people worked on this show. A lot of people had their hands in the pot. It wasn't just one little portion of soup made by one person. It was a team effort. And I think a lot of the times, because the number one kind of overseer of it all ends up being someone problematic, we see this with the Harry Potter franchise and books and series as well, it sometimes taints the whole thing. And there are elements of the show, I think, that even watching it with all that in your mind are tainted in a way. But I do think overall, there's so much merit to so many other aspects of Buffy that aren't just the creators doing. A lot of the story is based on the creator, and it is his vision, and it's what he was able to accomplish. And there's no taking away what he was able able to accomplish. But I don't think this needs to be an hour of praising him, more so praising the work of everyone else who helped this vision come to life. Because I think after like season 2 or 3, there are so many other writers and directors brought on that just take the story in so many interesting directions. I mean, Spike wasn't even a character that the creator wanted as a long-term character, so much so that he had a little animosity towards the character of Spike because of it, as I read in interviews. And I think it's really interesting to see how the fans kind of reclaimed the show. And the fans said, you know what? No, we love Spike. We love this. We love that. And this is what we want our show to be. And this is kind of setting the motion of what the show would be going forward. And that was really, really admirable to see watching in real time. Now, there were some things that I will say I did know going in. I knew the whole Willow storyline of her being gay. I mean, that is something that I feel like if you are engrossed in pop culture at all, you probably know that storyline, or at least the fact that that was a big deal in Buffy. Even if you don't know it's specifically Willow's story, you knew that the first lesbian couple, like long-term couple on screen, came from Buffy, or at least the most notable of the time. There were a few other things I knew. I knew about Joyce, the body. It's hard to talk about this without spoilers, so if you don't want Buffy spoilers, this is maybe not the hour of the subathon to watch. But I knew about Joyce because that's another thing that I feel like if you just watch videos on YouTube and compilations of different things, like even articles about the saddest TV deaths, you don't even have to click on the articles. Joyce is always going to be on the thumbnail. Things like that. I knew that Spike and Buffy would eventually get together because there's always that conversation out there. Angel and Buffy or Spike and Buffy? And that's just something that you get based on the cultural zeitgeist. There's really nothing you can do to help that. And I think just the nature of knowing that it's a series and a 7-season series, and that they would make 5 seasons after this on comics, that they would continue the story for seasons 8 through 12. You know that when Buffy dies, she's probably going to come back. When Buffy dies again, she's probably going to come back again. Those moments that I feel like at the time when you watch the show are probably a little more impactful because you don't necessarily know if they're going to make another season. Like, for example, at the end of season 5, when Buffy jumps in to save the world and sacrifice herself instead of the key, instead of her sister Dawn, I think that is a moment where I think a lot of people at the time were like, is that it? Is that the end? And I think, honestly, the reason why that episode didn't hit me as personally is because I know season 6, just because there are 2 more televised seasons, I know she's got to come back in some way, shape, or form. Now, the way they bring it back and the way they address things is very interesting. And I think that's a big prop that I have to give the show, is that every season felt like it ended. It didn't feel like it was opening the door for another storyline. It feels like at the end of season 2, there's a complete story arc, and the show could have ended at season 2. The show could have ended at season 3. I think there's a very definitive ending to season 3. Season 4 is the only season that I don't think has a very definitive ending, and it kind of like opens the door. I think because of all the Dawn stuff to come, they're almost making the penultimate episode of season 4 the ending, and then the finale of season 4 is almost kind of like this dream-esque Lynchian kind of experimental short almost. But very much kind of alluding to things that might come in the future. Season 5, though, I think has a very definitive ending, obviously, as I said, with Buffy sacrificing herself. And that was, for a period of time, the intended ending. There wasn't necessarily going to be another season. And then when it was announced that the season would get picked up by a different network, it kind of took the season a new show. So technically, season 5 could be looked at as the end of an era, at least for Buffy, same as season 3 being the end of like the high school era. And then season 6, I think, you could say there's a definitive ending to season 6 as well, even though I think that's a little bit more blurred like season 4 is. And then season 7, obviously, there really is an ending. But that kind of goes back to my overall point, though, of knowing there's 7 seasons. There are some moments that just or don't hit as powerful because you know this character has to make it out, or this character is going to be in a storyline later. Like, for example, when Joyce kind of got into remission after her brain tumor, I knew what was going to come later. So there was always that little pit in my stomach of like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? But I think, honestly, that made for a very interesting emotional response as well for when it does happen, because you're not kind of blinded by that moment. Now, there are some surprises, though, that I did not see coming at all. For example, Tara's death, I think, is something that took me completely by surprise. I knew they got together, but I had no idea that Tara's death was a part of the show, and let alone in that moment, in that scene and at that sequence after all that had been happening, going into the Dark Willow stuff. So there are moments, Jenny Calendar being one as well. I remember when I was chatting along with my friends watching the show for the first time, I said, oh, Giles and Jenny, they're my endgame couple. They're my favorite couple. And I know a lot of people, having now looked back at a Discord that they started, where I was technically not supposed to look. I looked after I watched that season, and I saw after Jenny died, everyone was saying, "Oh, Dylan's going to be so upset." It's true. There were moments that I did not see coming. So it was very interesting watching the show for a first time because there were some things I knew were going to happen, some things I didn't. But really, a good show. The reason why so many shows have endured the test of time is because it doesn't matter what the big moments are. It doesn't matter what the spoilers are, what the big deaths are, because it's all about the journey. It's all about your investment with these characters. And there's a reason people rewatch the show over and over again. There's a reason I watched it 3 times before this very review, because I also wanted to feel like I could talk about it as a fan, as someone who kind of watched it the first way through for plot and for just kind of comprehension and just kind of understanding what happens. And then the second time to kind of look for the foreshadowing, look for the moments where Willow's doppelganger comes in and is flirting with women, and she says, "Well, in that universe, I'm gay, and here I'm not gay." And then the other Willow's like, "Well, I mean, that foreshadowing that now when is very obvious foreshadowing, but at the time might be something that have gone over your head." Same as a lot of like the foreshadowing of Joyce and the foreshadowing of Buffy at the end of season 5, their deaths. There's a lot of foreshadowing in that season and even beyond. I mean, there's a comment made about a tumor or a brain aneurysm, like I think seasons before, or maybe it's the beginning of season 4 when they're in the library or something. So there are moments that are really foreshadowed, which was great to watch in the second go. And then the third one was for the more critical eye, for me to really examine these storylines, see really what works and what doesn't. Because I think the merit of being a new Buffy fan is that I don't have the nostalgia to where it's not all perfect for me. It's not like this like haze kind of mist where I'm just like, everything's great and grand. I mean, I think there are things to criticize, as there is with every media, every piece of media. Even my favorite film, Singing in the Rain, right back there, people have criticisms and I listen to them. Even though I love it, it's my favorite film, I still hear those criticisms, and to a degree, sometimes I agree with those criticisms. You can have criticisms for things you like. It's just a matter of whether the criticisms affect your personal enjoyment or not. And in my case, some criticisms I have for Buffy do hinder some of my enjoyment of Buffy, but all in all, like a lot of the fans of Buffy, the criticisms don't really hurt the overall picture for me because the characters are so strong, because the majority of the storylines work so well, and because of the nostalgia. Despite me not having nostalgia, there is still a nostalgic vibe that it gives off just based on the time period it's set and made, which is another thing that was really great about watching it now in a present lens, is that I am watching it at a time where CGI has advanced greatly. And I think if you're watching it at the time it came out, the CGI might have worked a lot better. Here, there are some very glaring moments where the CGI doesn't work very well. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just kind of adds to the charm. And I think that's why it's so much fun watching as a fan now. And I do call myself a fan because I have watched it 3 times and I do really like it. So there you go. You can exhale all my friends who are wondering, like, did Dylan like Buffy? I did. I did really like it. Is it one of my favorite shows of all time? It could be. And I think that's the thing, is like Buffy is a show where I could see myself continuing to rewatch, showing my kids someday, showing my partner someday, whoever I end up with, and saying, are we Angel and Buffy? Are we Spike and Buffy? I hope we're not either of them, honestly. And we'll get into that. But no, it's very interesting to just watch this and see those parallels, because this is a story about a girl who starts in high school, but then eventually goes to college, and then eventually kind of becomes a parent in a way, not necessarily having a kid, but kind of stepping into her mom's shoes and having to take care of the group and then be this leader, be the Giles to this new group of Slayers, which I think is very interesting, seeing her whole arc. But we are going to go kind of season by season and talk about it. And one last disclaimer before I get into the specifics is that I haven't seen Angel, the series Angel, which I think is one big blind spot that could aid a little bit in my criticisms here and there. Another reason why certain story arcs and character arcs felt maybe unfulfilled or felt like they were stretched a little too thin is because obviously they were probably going to pull some of them for Angel. I know Charisma Carpenter ended up going to Angel. Obviously David Boreanaz and Angel himself went to Angel. I know Spike ends up in Angel at some point. So I know there's some crossover. I think Faith goes to Angel at a point. But I didn't really read too much on Angel because I want to eventually watch that, and I want to eventually review that. Maybe for the next subathon, I'll have watched Angel. And the reason I haven't watched Angel is, pretty obvious if you know me. It's that I don't really like the character very much. But again, that's something where if I think I watch Angel and I like Angel, maybe I'll like Angel better in Buffy because I will have seen him in his own leading role with maybe a little bit more than just his one-note brooding personality. I don't know. We'll see. But again, that's kind of where I'm coming from, is someone who is able to be critical of the show. And I know it might hurt some people to hear some of the things that I find as negatives for the show, but I think if you really truly love something, you got to be able to point out the negatives so that it only emphasizes the positives even more. Because for every really cringy scene there might be, there are also a million other great scenes that are very fun in comparison, and it makes the greater moments that much greater. So Let's get into it. Let's get into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The first thing I want to talk about, and I've already kind of touched on a little bit, is the style. And I think a lot of the greatness of the show comes from how well you're able to embrace the style of it, because the style is very dated. But I think for the time, aside from the CGI, I mean, let's be honest, Graduation Day, that giant snake, it looks absolutely horrendous. But is there a comedy to it? Yeah. And is there something enjoyable about the comedy of it? Yes, and I do enjoy watching it because of that. I think the actual snake is ridiculous, but if you can kind of suspend your disbelief and say, no, that is the mayor turning into a giant snake, I think it makes it a little bit more fun to rewatch. But there are other moments, not just the snake. That's just one example I'm bringing up. I mean, the bugs going up Spike's nose and stuff, that's another example. I feel like every time I'm like, maybe they've advanced the CGI here. Nope, it's the same old stuff. But then again, that's kind of what you see in a lot of the Star Wars prequels. It's what you see in some of the Matrix movies. Like the CGI of that era is just very experimental. They're still trying to figure out their jams, still trying to use their resources. And this is a television budget, so they're not necessarily able to use those big blockbuster Hollywood budgets to aid in their special effects. So I don't necessarily fault them too much for that, though it is something that's very noticeable. But as I said, it's not necessarily whether stuff is good or bad, but it's whether or not you let the bad stuff become a negative for you, or if you let the bad stuff become part of the charm. And I think watching Buffy, the bad stuff actually, in terms of style, actually becomes part of the charm. And I really enjoy seeing the schlocky CGI stuff. And even just looking at the quality of the camera work, I mean, the first season is so much more stripped down than the seventh season. Even the seventh season looks crisper, looks clearer, and obviously it was made in 2003 versus 1997. But even in just 6 years, it's cool to watch the technology evolve. And I think that's something you don't get in like modern shows necessarily, because like look at Succession and Breaking Bad. Season 1 doesn't look much different than season 5, you know? And I think for this show, it very clearly does, but that aids to the charm of it. And it also aids in the development of Buffy. Like I said, being a character who kind of comes from a scrappier beginning, you know, she's struggling with being a child of a single parent household. She's struggling because she doesn't really fit in at her school because she is different. She's struggling with the idea of having the burden of being the only one, the chosen one. And I love how at the end, if you look at season 7 as a direct comparison point, at the end, she is the leader of so many Slayers, and her whole thing becomes about how she's able to spread the wealth and not be the only one and not have that burden, while also being kind of a parent to Dawn in a way after her mother leaves, and she's able to kind of come into her own. And I think it's a really great parallel that you also see stylistically, seeing how this show, as it gained more popularity, as more people felt inspired by the show, just like as the characters felt more inspired by Buffy, things became a lot clearer. It became a lot grander. It became a more professional product in terms of cinematically. And I know it's not a cinema, you know, it's not a film, but it is cinematic in a way that is very, very endearing to see and very fun to see. I mean, the first season is only 12 episodes and the last season is 22. Like they double the amount of episodes, because I really think the more characters you add, the more the audience loves them, the more you're able to do with these characters. And I also think that comes from figuring out the formula and figuring out what worked. And very much season 1 is all about kind of figuring out what is the direction we're going to go with the show. Is it going to be this monster of the week thing where every week's a different monster, she fights at the end, and that kind of becomes its own little serial? Or is it going to be an overarching story? Or is there going to be a mix of both? And I love how they kind of find that mix, where at the start, you're kind of getting all these episodes where it's like Buffy conquers this monster at the end, moving on to the next. But then I think around episode 5, when we get to Never Kill a Boy on the First Date, that's kind of where you see, oh, this girl also has a social life. This girl's also into boys. And that's kind of the extra layer. And then by the time you get to Angel in episode 7, that's like, oh, now she's in a relationship or she has this like weird connection with a vampire. How does that complicate things? Because it then becomes the Romeo and Juliet story, which I think dominates a lot of season 1 and season 2, and especially season 2, which we'll get to in a sec. But I think season 1 is all about trying to figure out what works better than others, because in season 2 is where I think they really embrace the idea of having a longer, more overarching storyline, where season 1 is still a little bit more sporadic. I think season 1 is a low point, especially on rewatch because of this, but I do think there is a merit to that, because it's really cool to watch the creators kind of figure out what they have and the gold they have as they mine it. You know, it's almost like you're at a mine and you're chipping away and you're like, is that gold? I can't tell. Let's chip from this end. Oh, is that gold? Let's chip from this end. And then finally, a big piece of gold comes out of this mine and you're like, wow, yeah, that's it. That's our show. That definitely goes to the style as well. The idea that they're just kind of finding their groove, finding their vibe, and just really discovering what it is about Buffy that is going to be so appealing. And I want to get to the whole main crux of the show itself being this story of female empowerment, which I think is a little bit soured knowing the real life circumstances involving the creator. But I think just in a very general scope, and because of the stuff that Sarah Michelle Gellar brings to this character, and that Allison Hannigan brings to hers, and Emma Caulfield brings to hers, like all these amazing female characters. I think it's really, really exciting to see a genre like horror where the pretty blonde is usually the first one killed off in a horror movie, and see her not only be the lead of a show, but kick so much ass and almost be invincible. The things that bring Buffy down and the weaknesses are never the vampires, really. It's more so the emotional stuff, the connection she has with other people. I mean, the lowest we see Buffy is when her mom passes, and that is because it is a real life circumstance. It has nothing to do with the mythology and the myth and the legends of the show. And I really like that, how like Buffy is just one of the strongest characters, both physically and emotionally, for a lot of the series, at least these first few seasons. And it's really amazing to see a role model that at the time I'm sure meant so much to young girls and just young kids in general, because I think young boys and girls and kids alike just could really grasp onto just having a very empowering lead that was a defiant part of that stereotype. She was defying that stereotype. And we see that with a lot of the other stereotypes. For example, Cordelia, who is, I think, my favorite character of the first few seasons. I love how she is the mean girl, but she's not. She's got that heart of gold that I think makes her just so much more interesting than just your stereotypical mean girl. She hits the stereotype for maybe a few episodes, but then the more we get to know her, the more she becomes a bigger part of the show, the more we're able to really kind of understand who she is and her care for her friends. And then kind of on the flip side, Xander, who you look at him and he doesn't look like the stereotypical nerd, with the glasses and, the dorky vibe. He's dorky, but in a very interesting and different and unconventional way. And I'll say it right now, I don't like Xander as a character, but I think he is an interesting twist on the nerd stereotype as a character. I don't agree with a lot of his methods. I don't personally like seeing him. I don't think his jokes are funny, but I do think he plays a role that is very interesting that you would not see in a show like this at the time. We would see it replicated a little bit later, something like Ron from Harry Potter, for example. But like, I do think, and I do like Ron a lot better than Xander, by the way. But I do think it's a very interesting play on the stereotype. And then Willow as well, kind of being the shy girl, but then being able to become that witch and essentially become the most powerful person in the franchise, even more powerful than Buffy in a way. And I think that is what's so interesting about the show, is that it took so many stereotypes and kind of flipped them on their heads. I mean, look at Oz too. He's, the short little Seth Green, and he's this really cool rock band guy who's also a werewolf. Like, there's a lot of really fun spins on these stereotypes of the characters we see in Buffy that are so different than any other teen high school show. And I think that's what this first season is really fun to watch too, is see these characters kind of settle in, because as I've seen from interviews, a lot of these characters, a lot of these actors kind of got the roles right before they started shooting them. So they had to like kind of just ease into it. It's something you see. I mean, I'm going to be comparing this to Harry Potter a lot just because it does deal with mythology, but also balancing social life and growing up at the same time. It's a very interesting parallel, and the creators are both scumbags now. So it's a very apt comparison, but I do think it's very interesting though to see kind of how, like Harry Potter, these are just kids trying to act. They're a little older than obviously Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and Rupert Grint were when they started, and Tom Felton, but they are kids and they're all meeting each other for the first time. So there is that awkwardness, but there's also that excitement of these kids being on set, a lot of them having not been in anything big for the first time. I mean, that first scene I think of when Buffy meets Willow is just so exciting, because the light and the star in her eyes and Allison Hannigan's eyes is so precious. And she's one of those characters that immediately I took to, because she reminded me of me in school, just a little bit awkward, but so caring for her friends. And, Willow goes on a very interesting arc and a very interesting journey, but I love how she's just the kind of Paddington of the group, for a while until she's not. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I really just like how the basic characteristics come into play. And then, of course, kind of the key to this puzzle, bringing it all together. And I'm not talking about Dawn yet. I know she is the key, but the key to this first season, I think, is Giles. And I think he's a character that I at first kind of took for granted. I was like, they need an adult there just because, balances things out. But the more I watch the show, and especially on rewatch, the more I realize just how integral Giles is to this overall story, being this father figure and being someone that is not only an advisor in the myth, but also a parent to Buffy in a way, because he also understands her power. And that's something when I rewatch, Joyce doesn't find out about Buffy till deep into the first few seasons. Like, I really think, I forget if it's season 2 or 3 off the top of my head, but there's a large period of time where she doesn't talk about her powers with Joyce. And, when you get to the part where Joyce unfortunately leaves the show, her and Buffy have grown so tight. But in those first few seasons, their relationship is very fractured. So Giles is such a fundamental part of this story because he is that father figure for Buffy. And I love how the show eventually kind of accepts it and makes it abundantly clear. And he actually does things that her father would do if he were in that circumstance. Like I think of the episode, which I don't think is a very good episode, but where Buffy has to like pay bills for the first time, and Giles helps her because that's what a father would do. And I really like how Giles takes on that role, but also is really cool and really badass. I mean, Giles has some of the best moments ever. I mean, he's the one who takes down Glory and Ben, and that is one of the most stone cold moments of this entire franchise. But I think season one has its charms. I really think it has kind of the foundations that we would see become greater things. But I think it's just only going to get better from here. But that's exciting as we move into season two. I think this is where we see a lot of those more side characters start to shine a little bit more. And I really do like seeing this cast, now that they've got a season under their belt, really click into things. And this does kind of have a very split type of personality this season, where I think the first half is still kind of in that monster of the week mode, where they're trying to just kind of talk about these very one-off kind of adventures. And then around the halfway point, though, I think it really takes a twist. And that is because they introduce Spike to the series, who is one of my favorite characters, a very interesting and complex and very layered character that we will talk about later, because he does have his downfalls as well. But it's really interesting to see the introduction of Spike, but then also this big change with Angel, which is in episode 13 and 14 of season 2, Surprise and Innocence, which I think is one of the most interesting elements of this story. Because like I said earlier, Angel's not necessarily my favorite character, and I think it's because he is just kind of one note. He's very brooding. He's kind of just very mysterious. He doesn't feel like he wants to be there. But then the more I rewatch the show, the more I realize, he is an old man still. Like you kind of remember, you kind of forget in a lot of vampire stories that these guys have seen it. They've been through it. And in Spike's case, he's a little bit more overtly extroverted about it. He's just kind of, very willy-nilly about a lot of it. But I think Angel kind of reserves it all and suppresses it, because also, as we see, there's something unleashed when he does eventually open up. And the first time I watched Surprise and Innocence, it was on that watch along. So some of the surprise wasn't very surprising, because I did see things coming. And again, not your fault, my friends. But I do think on the second rewatch, I watched it and I was like, is this basically trying to be like, oh, don't have sex or bad things will happen type storyline? But then the third time I watched it, it really clicked for me, where it is really just about how Angel, how he deals with so much of his this darker side of him, and how when he finally does decide to become vulnerable, it ends up being his undoing. I don't think it's really as much of a criticism of just like sexual activity as much as it is a criticism of the pattern and gender norms of the guy's just trying to sleep with the girl and then he's just going to ditch her type deal. And I know Angel, it's tough because Angel's someone we will eventually want to root for, we want to redeem, we want to save. I mean, he has his own series, but I think there's a very interesting parallel, and the creator and other people have spoken on that as well, about how it is kind of that dark truth. And that scene where Angel is finally Angelus and very bad and goes up to Buffy and is just like, I know you couldn't handle me. All this really just heartbreaking stuff. It's really evil stuff, but that's real life in a way, because I've seen so many relationships with my own eyes where the guy's just using the girl and then whoop, he gets her in bed and then he's on to the next. Or, in modern culture, it's the equivalent of ghosting in a way, which would have been really interesting to see in modern day lens, because ghosts is something you could have used quite literally in the show, because it's about myths and devils and demons and stuff. But it's one of those things that is just a very heartbreaking scene to happen. But I also think it adds a much more interesting storyline than just Angel and Buffy. Because Angel and Buffy, there's that forbidden romance because he is a vampire, but it's very clear they love each other and that not a lot is going to get in the way. But with Angelus, it's very interesting because she has that love for Angel, but now he's something completely different. He's changed, but she knows there's goodness somewhere deep inside him. And I think this is kind of what they, I think, master even more with the Spike relationship later. This kind of good versus evil. Like, who am I really looking at? Am I looking at the real Spike or the evil Spike? And I think that's similar to a case with the Angel thing, except I think he's very much not a 50-50. He's either 100% good or 100% evil. And I think once he makes the switch to evil, it just becomes a more interesting show, because you have the acting from David Boreanaz, who I think this is probably his best acting work in the show, just committing to the bit and being ruthless and not giving Angel any redemption, any redeeming qualities as a character in this moment, to where we, the audience, want to see Angelus die, but we don't want Angel to die. And I think that's very, very important, and kind of gets to the crux of what makes the show so special, is the fact that you can have these Monster of the Week episodes and they're fun, but really these larger storylines about Buffy's growth and her relationships are so much more important. This could be just a show about relationships that has no mythology attached. The mythology is so amazing and it makes it as special as it is, but really we're just invested in these characters and their relationships. And if this were just a regular high school romance, I think a story like this with Angel, except instead of becoming a vampire, he just becomes a bad person and ghosts her, I think it would be just as effective. And I think that's the merit of season 2. And that kind of takes us through the second half of the season, also with Jenny and Giles, who are a happy couple. There's no turn really to be had there, and she tries to fix Angel and then she dies. And that scene where Giles, goes upstairs and all the roses are laid out and he thinks he's gonna come into a romantic evening with Jenny only to see her dead, is just one of the saddest moments in any shows. It's really, really terrifying to watch as a viewer every time I watch it. There's certain scenes where I just have a lot of trouble rewatching. I will never skip over scenes just because I think that goes against the integrity of the artist to skip over anything. But it does make it very difficult to rewatch. Like that, The Body is an episode that's very difficult to rewatch. We'll get to there in a bit. But season 2 ends obviously with her killing Angelus and thus Angel. And this is another thing where, knowing Angel, the series, was happening, I knew they would bring him back in some way. But for a little bit of time on my first watch, I was like, you know what? Maybe Angel takes place before Buffy, and maybe that's what Angel's about. And then season 3 happens and Angel comes back. And that's the one thing about some of these season finales, is they're so complete. As I said, there's such a great finality to these seasons, but then at the immediate start of the next season, it's like, oh, never mind, this character's back. Which is what I really appreciate actually about the season 1 finale, because Buffy dies and is brought back all within an episode. You don't get this big cliffhanger for the next season. And I think the cliffhangers are effective. I mean, I really do like how there is a little bit of season 3 that is just settling into Buffy, settling back into her life. And honestly, as hard as it is to watch the Scooby Gang fight, I actually think this show is maybe at its strongest when that clash is happening. I mean, the Dead Man's Party, a lot of people hate that episode from what I've read, but I find it really interesting because Xander and Willow, they don't really know what Buffy's been through. They really don't know the depth of Buffy's trauma. And I think it's very interesting when you're kids, you don't necessarily comprehend, you don't think about all the different kind of angles to a story. And I think it's kind of heartbreaking to see Buffy go through what she's going through, because I don't think anyone has her back in this sense. Everyone has her back. They all love her, but they also feel resentment toward her because you left us. You left town, and how dare you, Buffy? But then we're the audience watching, like, how dare they? Like, Buffy, there's a reason Buffy's hurting, guys. Can you not see it? And I think that's one of the more interesting elements of the show, is her kind of processing the events of the season past. And we see that a lot at the beginning of season 3, and we see that especially in the beginning of season 6. And season 6 we'll talk about, because it's a very hit or miss season, but I do think the beginning of season 6 and the beginning of season 3 deal with a very similar idea, where the characters want to move on, but Buffy can't. And I really like that kind of first bit of the season where the characters are fighting. And we will get into more fighting as it goes along. I mean, the beginning of season 3, it's tough to watch because of the fighting, but I think it makes the story that much more powerful. And, it shows us, the audience, how invested we are in these characters, that we care so much about what's going on, and that we want them to make up and we want them to resolve things. And same with Giles and Joyce as well. And, this gets us into the whole plot line where of course, Willow and Xander start cheating on Oz and Cordelia with one another, which at the time when I first watched it, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I think that's the reason why I really don't like Xander, is because every time I start to warm up to him, which is usually when he gets into a healthy relationship, or a relationship that's maybe not healthy, but at least he's in a relationship, and that causes him to grow some with Cordelia and then later with Anya, and then he finds a way to fuck it up. He finds a way to ruin it, and I know that's what kids do. But I also think it's because they make Cordelia a much more likable character as season 2 and 3 go on. I mean, Homecoming is such a great episode because it's really just about Cordelia and Buffy. It's really about letting their bond flourish, and that's what I like about this show as well, is that it's not just about the couples. It's not just about Buffy and Angel. It's not just about Buffy and her friends. It's not just about Xander and Cordelia and Willow and Oz. It's about Xander and Buffy and Cordelia and Oz and Buffy. Like there's all these like intermingled webs. The characters interact with everyone. And we see it later in the show too with like Tara, for example. The moments between Tara and Buffy where it's like they don't really have a reason to talk, but the fact that they are talking is nice. It shows that like the friends aren't very selective. They are a gang, they are a group, they are a unit. And especially at this point in the season with Oz and Cordelia like as officially part of the group, I think it makes it really, really tough when the cheating happens. But I think it also aids in some of the most interesting storylines because I think it kind of, first off, it brings Anya into it because it ends up spinning off into Cordelia's revenge and hatred of Xander, which eventually accumulates in The Wish, which I think is a really cool episode. It's like, It's a Wonderful Life, but from Cordelia's point of view, where if Buffy hadn't come to Sunnydale or wasn't a Slayer or whatever, what would have happened? And that's where we get Anya for the first time, who grants these wishes. But I really do like the device of the cheating storyline, but I also am so frustrated by it. Also because I never bought Willow and Xander as a couple. I get it that Willow always had a crush on Xander, but it's also like, especially because we know where Willow's character is going very, very soon. It's like, why ruin two great relationships? But then are they good relationships? Who's to say? But I think that's a very interesting part of the season. And this is also when we're introduced to Faith and we're introduced to the mayor. I mean, season 3 is just so good. Season 3 might be my favorite season. I just love how everything layers into one another. Like there really doesn't feel like there's a lot of monster of the week in this season. And I feel like when it does get into like the monster of the week, it's more of like just like the circumstances of the week, but it's still in the context of the main story. Like for example, Homecoming, yeah, it's about this Slayer hunter thing where like these hunters are trying to hunt down the Slayers. Like that's, I guess, the monster of the week. But really, it's about Cordelia and Buffy's relationship. Just like Band Candy. It's all about the adults taking this candy and turning into little kids, and you get Giles and Joyce hooking up, and Principal Snyder's doing something funny. But really, it's again to aid in the storyline with Xander and Willow. Like I think the good thing about season 3 is that it really finds the balance very well in kind of balancing the weekly episodicness of it while also having these overarching storylines work. Because on top of that, you do have Faith, which I mentioned, who I want to talk about real quick, is just such a great character, such an interesting character. Again, she does something that is very, very, very unforgivable. She does a lot of things that are unforgivable. One very particular instance, but I just think her dynamic in the show is so intriguing. And I think because you see her and Buffy, who are very similar circumstances, but have two very, very different outlooks, two very different personas, two very different attitudes, ways of walking, ways of talking. And it shows just how, the people we surround ourselves with can really inform who we are in a very interesting way. And it is a testament to Buffy's friendships and her relationships, and especially her parenting with her mom and also with Giles. I think it's very telling. And then when we see Faith kind of end up in the wrong hands with the mayor, and you see how he's a bad influence on her, there's love there between the mayor and Faith. He definitely does care for her, but it's an evil thing, and it makes her evil essentially. And it brings out, or I should say, it brings out the evil in her. But all the stuff with Faith is so, so interesting. And I think, that whole moment when she kills someone and her and Buffy are trying to like hide from it. And then eventually Faith tries to put the blame on Buffy. But I think it shows the realness of this world. And I think there's a lot of great moments in this series that really do that really bring us the awareness of like, wait, this is like the real world. This is stuff that's happening that is universal. This is where we are no longer in fantasy land. Like this is real. This person is dead. This mortal human is dead. This is not a vampire. And I think that's such an interesting storyline. And then we also get Angel stuff. I think the Angel stuff is the weakest part of season 3. I think honestly, because season 2, it leaves such an emotional ending, and I think the beginning of season 3 is so emotional that I almost wish if they had just kept Angel dead, I think it would have honestly made Buffy's arc that much more impactful. But I think bringing him back only to send him away at the end of the season, I don't know, it's almost like it didn't need to happen. And it definitely leads to some great moments at the end of season 3, especially the prom. I mean, the prom is hands down top 3 episodes for me. It is one of my favorite episodes. I think because of that speech Jonathan gives about the Slayer and how she's like the protector, the class protector. I mean, that moment, I am weeping every time I watch that moment. It is one of the great moments. But then when Angel shows up at the prom after breaking up with her, I'm always like, ugh, like every time you either die or you break up with her, you still come back. But then I realize, you know what? Like it's the closure. And the thing is like, she needs that closure, I guess. But I don't know. Angel's very particular for me. And I really do think if I watch Angel the show, I might have a deeper appreciation for Angel the character, just because I feel like in this season he's just kind of hanging around waiting to get back in a relationship with Buffy, but then as soon as he's back in a relationship with Buffy, he ends it because he realizes it can't be long term, aka the creators realize that they need to make a spin-off show and send him to California. So this is the easy way to separate him, just like having Xander and Cordelia break up is the easy way to get Cordelia into Angel as well. But I think Xander and Cordelia makes more sense because that actual plot is really well thought out. And as crushing and devastating as it is, I think it does have a lot of emotional heft. Whereas Angel, I feel like he spends most of the season just kind of sitting around waiting for more things to happen. But then at the end, I think because of the catharsis of the prom and graduation day, those episodes, I do think, I'm much more a fan because of how those episodes turned out of Angel being in it than if he weren't. So I guess I came around on the Angel thing a little bit. I think he aids in some great moments in the episodes, though I still don't necessarily know if he's entirely needed throughout season 3. But season 3 does end with the prom, as I mentioned, as one of my all-time favorite episodes, because again, it reminds us that they are kids and like this is what's important to them. And I do want to bring up Earshot real quick because that is kind of the big introduction of Jonathan. He's been in the shadows a little bit, but this is where we really get to know him as a character. And despite what happens with Jonathan later on the show and the trio and all that in season 6, I still do think this moment with him in the prom is really sweet because, Buffy saved him in Earshot. And it's one of the most interesting twists on a school shooting episode. Usually with like One Tree Hill and Degrassi, school shooting episodes are very straightforward, and they're very scary. But here it's like, the school shooting doesn't even happen because it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to be a school shooting. He was going to kill himself. And Buffy kind of talks him off the edge. And it ends up culminating in this beautiful moment at the prom, which I think is really lovely. If the season had ended at the prom, it would have been really nice. But then we get an added bonus of ending on graduation day, which is, of course, the big mayor reveal where he becomes the snake. You get a lot of great moments. My buddy Larry has a great final moment there. And it really does feel like the end of that era because it is the end of Sunnydale High, which is where I think season 4 falters a little bit, is because you no longer have that communal common meeting place in the library. I mean, just the fact that you have that gorgeous library to like have a meeting place, and we don't get to the magic box until season 5. I think season 4 being Giles' living room is kind of a lame meeting spot. It kind of takes away for some of the charm in that sense. And just because I don't know, something about the college years in season 4 just aren't as appealing for some reason. Maybe it's because it's just not the same vibe. It's trying to take itself a little bit more seriously because it's college and not high school. And I think with the introduction of Riley, I think there's an interesting story there with the initiative. I kind of like the idea of the initiative taking a more militaristic approach, whereas the Slayer is a more mythological approach. And I really like that kind of science versus myth thing that is present in the season, but it is a very big part of the season for a big bad that is ultimately pretty forgettable in Adam. In Adam, I think I can't even remember his name right now because he's a very forgettable big bad. But I do think the relationship between Riley is very interesting because he is the only human she dates. He is not a vampire. And I think there's something to be said about her having a normal relationship and her struggling because of the normal relationship. The idea that she has to hide the fact that she's a Slayer because she doesn't want to make him feel inferior. And I really think that's a very interesting dynamic. And that kind of culminates in the mid-season around Hush, which is, spoiler alert, my favorite episode of the series. I think season 4 as a whole is pretty weak. I don't think it's a very good season, but I think Hush is such a good episode because it's the idea that these characters are finally having these revelations and ready to talk about them, and then they're stripped of their voices. And I think it's a really cool parallel to what we'll have with Once More with Feeling in season 6, where the characters don't want to reveal what they really think inside because they don't want to hurt the other people, but then they are forced to by song. I think it's a really great parallel in 180 when you watch those episodes back to back, which I have done. I watched Hush and then I watched Once More with Feeling, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Hush is really great because, it deals with how you communicate with the absence of words. And then when they finally get their voices back at the end, and then they don't know how to say anything to each other at the end with Riley and Buffy sitting on their beds. I think it's the perfect way to end that episode. And just that episode in general, I love how it is essentially your Monster of the Week episode, but because these characters have been building up these storylines and these stakes throughout the season so far, and then also with Willow kind of having these first kind of inklings of feelings towards Tara, I think it's very, very fun to see in the silence how they're able to communicate. Now Willow and Tara have this moment where they just touch and they're able to move that big, I think it's a vending machine, just by touch, and just kind of by their souls. And it kind of says to us, the audience, that their souls are always meant to be together. And I really love that. Even though we've only known Tara, I believe, for almost an episode, not even. I think she's introduced at the beginning of Hush, if not very earlier before that. But I really do love how Hush kind of furthers these characters' relationships, Xander and Anya as well, without saying anything. It's all visual storytelling, and it's a testament to the actors how they're able to pantomime the whole thing. And the villains are just outright terrifying. I think they're absolutely terrifying. The reason I think season 4 struggles, all in all, really, is just because I think with the absence of Cordelia, who is one of my favorite characters, the stuff that they do with Oz, which I know Seth Green wanted out of the show. So, like, how do you write him out of the show? And I hate when stories kind of make it a bad, farewell. Like, why can't you just make the character go off in a nice, peaceful way? They did this in Grey's Anatomy, too, with Alex Karev, where they needed to just decide, oh, Alex Karev's going to just leave his wife and go back to his ex-wife, who we haven't seen in seasons. Like, yeah, just stuff like that very much frustrates me. And to make it like, oh, well, Oz has got to cheat on Willow now, because I also think that backs him into a corner, because quite literally Oz says, well, you cheated on me last season. And I think the problem with the show is that I think a lot of the times they have great ideas, but they've already just done them, that it's hard to kind of work around it. One example I can think of is after Joyce dies, Dawn wants to bring her back, and Willow and Tara are like, you can't bring her back. But then when Buffy dies, they bring her back. And I know they explain that Buffy died of a different circumstance, whereas Joyce died of natural circumstances. But again, this forces the writers to have to create all these rules and loopholes because they don't want fans to point out the fact that it happened earlier. Like in this case where Oz cheats on Willow, and Willow's like, well, you cheated on me first. Well, it was different because it was high school, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of one of those corners the show gets backed into. And it doesn't happen often, but this is one of those examples where I'm like, they could have just found a better way for Oz to do it. Have him get recruited by some other werewolves as like, you can save the world and come with us, and they have to break up just in a natural way. Or have it be about how Willow discovers her sexuality and her feelings, and that's why she breaks up with Oz, and then Oz can be free to go. I just hate that they needed to make Oz this villainous presence in this moment and give him something bad to do to get rid of him. And yes, he does come back later in New Moon Rising to get a little bit more closure, but even then he has his moments where he acts out and it's very clear, oh, you're right, I do have to stay away from you. I just really don't like how they handled the departure of Oz in the show, and it's really sucks to see, because I really like Willow, and I really like what they do with Willow in this season, because spoiler, this is the season where Willow's sexuality comes to its fruition, that the fact that she is gay, which we did see obviously foreshadowing of, especially in Doppelganger Land, which is also one of my top 10 favorite episodes. I love that episode of the evil Willow from the parallel universe or whatever. But I do really like how this is kind of ushered into the show, just because it's so natural. There's no real attention brought to it. When they kiss for the first time, it's like a big deal, but otherwise, like, it's very natural. It doesn't feel like it's being shoehorned in, but it also doesn't feel like it's being, given so much attention to where it's this huge big deal. It just is. And I like that about the show, that it's just this romance. And sure, there are moments like where Buffy reacts to it and she has a reaction, and Xander has a reaction. Everyone has a reaction to it, but it's not like there's a whole episode or 2 episode or 3 episode arc where Willow is, struggling with her sexuality and coming out. It's really not that. It's very subtle. And there are a few scenes where she's coming out to her friends, but that's it. And then they are just a couple. Now, Tara doesn't get fully ingrained in the group, which is kind of a complaint I have about the show, is that it always feels like they're kind of keeping her at an arm's distance. And I have a theory as to that, why that is. And I think it's because, and the creator has even said in his interviews, that he always wanted to put a character in the opening credits so he could kill them off in the same episode for shock value. And that's just one of the most pretentious things I've ever heard. I'm so sorry. I mean, maybe at the time it was really cool and people were like, oh my God, you just put her in the credits only to kill her. Ha ha ha. But to me, that just kind of seems like kind of rude to the actor. I don't know. I feel bad for Amber Benson in that sense, where it's like, she's clearly part of the gang for all of season 5 and almost all of season 6. She kind of goes away a little bit in season 6 when they break up, and then she comes back. But like, she's very present in season 5, and she has like full songs in For Once More with Feeling, and like, she is such a big part of the show. And especially during the body, she's the person who's able to connect with Buffy off the bat, because she lost a parent as well. And I feel like they just never give her due. It always feels like she is there to support Willow's storyline, and even then, I feel like Willow, aside from the magic and the dark magic and stuff, is kind of sidelined as well for a lot of the season. I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like Tara just never really got her time to truly shine. It's always in service of Willow. And the one episode she gets where it can be her own episode with her family, with Amy Adams, who shows up at the Magic Box. I mean, that episode is great. And she's finally part of the group. But then, like, just throw her in the opening credits there. And I know it's like a contractual thing and a budget thing, but as soon as Dawn is introduced, Dawn's in the credits. And then at the start of season 5, Spike is in the credits. So like it just felt a little weird that Tara wasn't in the credits. And if it's solely for the purpose of doing a cheap trick and a big gag when she dies only for shock value, I don't know. I find that a little disrespectful. Again, I don't like the creator of the show, so I'm easy. It's easier to criticize things like that I think were solely done for that reason. Now, if it had been like a Giles thing where he goes away for a little while and they take him out of the credits, and then she were to come back and die, that's different. But the fact that they like don't even put her in the credits at all, solely because he has this dream of having someone added to the credits just to die. I don't know. I don't like that moment, or that whole storyline. And we'll get there in a sec, the whole Tara death. But yeah, the end of season 4, obviously they stopped the initiative. I think the initiative itself is kind of a weak, big bad with Adam. So there's really not a lot about the initiative that really stands out about season 4. It really is just Hush being this kind of show-stopping, series episode, which I absolutely love. And then the 2 Faith episodes are really great as well. When Faith kind of like finally gets out of her coma and they have that body swap moment for Who Are You? That is such a good episode. And I love seeing Sarah Michelle Gellar and Eliza Dushku playing each other's roles. I think it's really fun, even though Eliza Dushku does stuff that Buffy would never do, and vice versa. But that's just part of the fun of the acting of it. I love that so much. And then she's kind of sent off. She kind of is no longer in the show until the very, very end, which was a little bit sad to see. Even though she does have that one moment, and this is something that happens in season 3, but I kind of glossed over. When she rapes Xander, I don't like it, and that's coming from someone who doesn't like Xander. I don't like that moment, and I really feel for Xander in that moment, and that's just really, really hard to watch. And I think it happens later in season 6 as well with another character where there's a moment of sexual assault, but at least, and I'm not excusing any of it, but at least that example of sexual assault actually has to do with the character and the idea that there's still a monster inside them. Whereas here, I think it's just to emphasize the fact that Faith is bad, but it's kind of portrayed in a sexy way that I feel like sexual assault should never be portrayed. I don't know. I have a real problem with that. That makes it hard for me to like truly embrace Faith as like one of my favorite characters. But it is, regardless, nevertheless, great to see Faith back for season 4 for a little bit of time, only to go away again, who I believe is in Angel at some point. So maybe I'll have to watch Angel to see Faith there. But we get into season 5, which is another great season, I think. I think this and 3 are the most complete seasons because they're able to balance the everyday life and the everyday hardships of just being a kid or being a young adult in this sense, because they're no longer kids, and of course the mythology and the horror and all the stuff we love about it. And I think that's also because we're getting this great Spike storyline, because he is quite literally this hybrid of man and evil. And I think that's where it's a little different than Angel, like I said. Whereas Angel, he's 100% good Angel, and then he becomes 100% bad. There's no nuance in between. There's no slipping in and out of Angel, Angelus, Angel, Angelus, where Spike is as if Angel and Angelus had kind of coexisted in one body. And I really like how they kind of drop the hints that he likes her throughout the season. They don't jump right in, which I appreciate. They kind of take the time to really build it up and really make it hit when it finally hits that he loves her. And then when it finally hits, when she finally takes him and they finally hook up. And then when it hits, when they hit the down part, which is the part I was alluding to, which is not fun to watch. But season 5 is really great, especially also what it deals with Buffy's family, with Joyce. Obviously, knowing what happens at the end of season 5 with Joyce, it makes the beginning of the season even harder when she finally goes in remission and everyone's happy, and it's like that, like I said, that gut feeling of knowing that something bad is still going to happen to her. But I think the introduction of Dawn is really interesting. The first time I watched it, I was so confused. I thought I had missed something. I rewound it. I was like, what is going on? Who is this sister? Has she been mentioned in previous seasons? And maybe I just forgot. Has she been living with the dad? But then they do such a good job explaining it. And that's the kind of luxury with a fantasy series, is that you're able to kind of play with it. You're kind of able to introduce characters and make it make sense because it's a mythological universe. They were able to say, well, she was kind of created as a figment to become this key, this thing, this key point, and that everyone else's minds were kind of the opposite of Eternal Sunshine, where instead of being wiped, their minds were almost added memories of this Dawn figure. And I really like how each of the characters kind of eventually catches on, how Buffy and Giles are the first to know, and then eventually Joyce, in her moment of sickness, because of the sickness, is able to tell. And that's kind of the mother instinct thing of just being able to know, like, Dawn's not mine. And I really like that. I think Dawn is a great character too. They don't make her annoying, and they could have easily made her annoying. I think if she were any younger, it would have been annoying, or any older, it wouldn't have been as believable. But I think Michelle Trachtenberg was the perfect age to really bring this really interesting character to light. And I think you get a lot of great stuff from a lot of the side characters as well. Like Anya gets a bigger presence in this season, which is really great. Again, I don't like Xander, but I like Anya and Xander as a couple because I think it brings a lot of interesting moments to Anya's story, because Xander is the person who isn't mythological. He has no powers. He has nothing. And I think through that, Anya is able to realize the things about being human that she likes, and the idea of being a human and what that entails. Now, I have problems with their relationship. I don't like the fact that Xander always seems to be embarrassed by her when she speaks. Like, I don't know. I find the way she speaks very endearing, and I feel like everyone knows how she speaks. So I feel like every time she opens her mouth and they all kind of look at her and say, like, Anya, why, how can you say that? It's like, do you not know that, like, this is just how Anya talks? She's very blunt. I mean, she was a demon. She doesn't necessarily get it 100% of the time. And I feel like occasionally the writers and I guess the characters sometimes forget that. And then especially Xander always kind of looks embarrassed about Anya. And it's like one of those things where if you love someone, sure, there might be a time or two where you get embarrassed by them, but like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm a different type of romantic than Xander is, but I don't think it's something to be ashamed of, Xander, and I don't think you should really take out all your frustration on Anya as you do in this season. But regardless, I really love Anya in this season. I love this season. It gets obviously very tough to watch when we hit the body, that episode, but that episode is quite literally, I think, a masterpiece in storytelling. If Hush weren't just so cool, I would probably put the body at number one in my favorite episodes, but it is also an episode I don't rewatch. So it's one of those episodes where like I said, I don't skip, but it's not one that I like go out of my way to watch again. Whereas like Hush is something I'll just put on the TV without having to watch the binge. Like I'll never skip over the body during the binge when I watched it all the way through, but I'll never just go out of my way to be like, I feel like watching the body, because it's just its own thing. It's almost like a little art film. In the context of this grand scheme and this grand show. And there's just so many amazing moments in it. Honestly, my favorite moment of that episode is Anya's monologue, because she's probably the person who's least connected to Joyce. But I think because of that, she is also able to have the most authentic reaction to it, because Willow doesn't know how to react. Xander barely knows how to react. He punches a hole through the wall. Buffy surely doesn't know how to react in all this. Like, you barely see her shed a tear at first. Dawn obviously has just such a crushing reaction, but Anya is the one who's, because she's so blunt, is able to just kind of say her piece and speak her mind, and she kind of speaks for everyone, and how unfair it is. And I really love this kind of idea of the person who got to live forever now being a human, and how she has to kind of face the realities of what being a human is, and the unfairness that comes with being a human and natural death. And I think the whole thing about Joyce's death that makes it so impactful in this series is that it feels like everything in this series can be done or fixed with magic, whether by Willow, or whether by Buffy and the Slayer, or with the mythology and with Giles and his research. But the body is the one time nothing can prevent it, and nothing can happen, nothing can fix it. And I think that is what makes it such a strong episode and such a sad one, is because Buffy knows that this is the one hurdle she cannot jump. And it's just, it's devastating. But I just love how it plays out with very little music, very little mythology and monsters and stuff. There's that one instance where the zombie kind of raises up, or the vampire in the morgue, which honestly, I would have just done without. Honestly, personally, if I were just making this episode, I would have just done without it. I would have just had Dawn go up to the body, have that final moment, and have that be it. I think the fact that they like fight that zombie and stuff, or that vampire, like, I honestly think that took me out of the episode for a bit, when it was just such a raw, authentic 45 or whatever minutes of episode. Like, it really is one of the most striking episodes of television, and it's one of those moments that is felt throughout the rest of the series, and we really feel that. And I think that's honestly what brings Spike and Buffy together in a way, is because she doesn't want to be happy right now. She wants to wallow in this. She wants to, feel this darkness, and Spike is that darkness that she can kind of take comfort in. Now we get to the gift, which I think is the turning point of the series. This is where the series, I think, could have ended, and it would have been a very powerful ending. But if it had ended here, I do think that whole last moment, I feel like she just jumps right in, and then it cuts to the gravestone. Like, I honestly think if this were the final episode, I would have liked it to be maybe 20 minutes longer to kind of really let those final moments breathe. But I really do like how Buffy is the ultimate sacrifice. I think the only downfall of this episode is, A, like I said, because you have 2 seasons coming afterwards, Buffy's not going to be dead forever. And B, because you just saw Joyce die, it almost feels like it doesn't take away from the Joyce death, obviously, but it feels like Joyce dying and for her daughter to be processing it in 6 episodes just to die anyway. It's one of those things where if this had happened a season later and Joyce's death had happened a season earlier, I think now Buffy had gone on this huge emotional arc. But at the time where she makes her decision to sacrifice herself, like she hasn't even had the time to fully process Joyce's to where it just feels like it's quickly, almost too quickly jumping into the next thing. Quite literally, I didn't mean to say jumping in, but you know what I mean. She quite literally jumps into the next thing. That being said, though, I love that final line she says to Dawn, where the hardest part of life is living in it, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I don't have any notes for this because I've seen this 3 times and I feel like it's all just in my head and I just need to spit it all out. We're making good time. We're almost an hour into this review, but I do think, just that whole final, moment and sacrifice is very powerful. But I do think the fact that she comes back in season 6 and comes back so early, obviously, because it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you're not going to wait a whole half a season or 2 seasons or whole season or whatever to bring her back. You're going to bring her back in the first 2 or 3 episodes, and she is brought back at the end of episode 2, I believe. It does take a little bit of weight off of that moment. It does make that moment a little less impactful, but I do like what it does for the beginning of season 6, which we'll get into right now, which I think is one of the strongest beginnings to a season. It's very dark, and this is where they transition to a different network, so it's already got a darker tone and feeling and style to it. I think the deaths are a little bloodier than usual. I think the subject matter is just a little darker. Even in season 5 that deals with Joyce Summers' death, there's still levity to the darkness. They are still having moments where they're able to kind of make these really more fun storylines in tandem with the darker stuff. And I think season 5, because of that balance, is able to balance everything so well. I didn't even talk about Glory. I mean, Glory is such a great villain because she's very, very devilish and dastardly and scary, but also very funny and very kind of over the top and a little bit insane and manic. And she's got that extra element of being Ben, which I love. I love how at first you're not sure if Ben is working with her, and then when you reveal that Ben is her, but then you find out that Ben really isn't her. They just kind of transition back and forth. So Ben and Glory aren't necessarily in cahoots, which makes the moment where Giles kills them very difficult because Ben really did do nothing wrong. But it is Glory who is kind of commanding that, where you have to get rid of Ben to get rid of Glory. But yeah, one of the best big bads, if not the best big bad, next to Angel. But I do think season 6 takes it in a very dark direction that has a little less levity. Obviously, there's the musical episode, which we'll get to in a sec, but like I do feel like in general, especially also because of how it ends with seeing red and with the whole Dark Willow stuff, I feel like the levity is a little less successful here. And they do try, like I said, the trio is meant to try to add levity too, but still, I just don't think it ever gets that levity that it really should, because there's just so much darkness that comes with the beginning of season 6 with this whole premise of Buffy going to heaven and not wanting to be brought back, which is a little bit, I don't want to say problematic because it really adds a lot of interesting thematic depth, but I do also see how it could spread the wrong messages if you're watching it for the first time, where Buffy's like, I wish I had just stayed dead. And I think it could give the impression that like, maybe death is better than life, and I hope that's not the impression it gives off, but I could see people taking that impression from the beginning of season 6. And eventually, though, when we do get to other episodes in the series, we do see, though, that Buffy does decide that she does want to live, and not just because she wants to live, she wants to show Dawn the world, she says, which I think is a beautiful way to kind of bring this story full circle. But for a while of season 6, it's a lot of wallowing, and again, this brings Spike and Buffy together, which I think is a beautiful relationship because it is so complex and so nuanced, and it is kind of like that kind of hybrid of if Angel and Angelus were the same, and had she been dating someone who was very dark but also understood her and what the power of that is. And it's also very interesting because Tara and Willow, the whole thing is that it shouldn't matter who you love who you love. Yet when it comes to Spike and Buffy, it's not that everyone judges it. And that's another theme that we see, kind of like with the stuff with season 3 when Buffy leaves Sunnydale. It's that idea that the friends don't necessarily understand what Buffy's going through. And when she does finally reveal that she is with a Spike, and people find out she's with Spike, a lot of them take their anger out on her. A lot of them judge her. And the only person who doesn't is Tara. And there's something to be said about that Tara's like, I get it, like, and I think that's because of the sexuality of Willow and Tara. It almost feels like that is essentially what they're almost saying with Buffy and Spike, where it's like, I'm gonna get judged for this relationship, but I love who I love, type deal. And Buffy herself can't even admit that she loves him. Does she even love him? I don't know. I always like to believe she does, but she just doesn't want to admit it. And then when she finally does admit it at the very end of the show, and Spike says, "No, I know you don't," I actually think she does, but I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I really do like how this does bring Spike and Buffy together because it just adds so much complexity to it. But it is a very tough season to watch because it is kind of in the wake of that big sacrifice, and I feel like that does dwell on a lot of the drama of the season. It definitely is a harder watch when you watch it once more. Speaking of once more, though, once more feeling is that kind of big breath of levity, which is funny because this is kind of where all the drama comes out. This is where Giles makes the decision to leave, and this is where Anya starts to pick up on the fact that Xander might not be in it for the best interest, which again foreshadows how their relationship goes. This is also kind of setting up Tara and Willow when Tara is going to leave Willow because Willow put that forgetful spell on Tara. It's like all these different things that are very, very interesting. All kind of bubbling up, and it's kind of the thing I said with Hush, where Hush is all about them wanting to say something but not being able to, and here it's not wanting to say something but then being forced to, and I think that's such a cool 180 parallel. I think the two of them work so well together. Now, the first time I watched Once More the Feeling, I didn't really know what to make of it because I am a big musical fan, but let's be honest, when you're on a TV budget, it's never going to look as grand and as beautiful as a musical, and the music itself is a little campy, a little hokey, but the more I rewatch it, and this is an episode I've watched more than 3 times, I do really like how it does kind of embrace that Rocky Horror aspect where everything's very clearly auto-tuned. It's very much not the best sound mix. Some of the images are a little hokey, the songs are a little hokey, but that again adds to the charm. Like I was talking about at the very beginning with the style, is that there's a charm to it being imperfect. There's a charm to the imperfection, and I really actually think that endears me to Once More with Feeling a lot. I think it's a very interesting episode. I do like some of the songs, even though I don't think any of them are like, masterpiece songs. They all fit these characters very well. I love how Xander and Anya kind of get that kind of song and dancey, like Singing in the Rain-esque number. And I think, honestly, this is probably the best stuff Xander does in the show. I like his dancing and singing a lot. I actually find him very humorous and very fun in this episode, even though, like I said, it does foreshadow the relationship problems to come later for them, which is not fun because Hell's Bells is probably my least favorite episode of the series, but we'll get there in a sec. But Once More the Feeling, yeah, it's a fun time. It's not necessarily in my like top 5 episodes like it is so many other people, only because I just think the series has so many great episodes. But it is a very fun break, and I do think of all the musical episodes of all the shows that do it, like Grey's Anatomy, I do think this is the best one. I think this is the most successful musical episode that they could have made it. And then Hint and Battle, I mean, just insanely talented, insanely great. Gone too soon. Rest in peace. But yeah, as the season goes on, we get a lot more of the Spike Buffy stuff. Spike Buffy, Spike Buffy. We get a lot of like Dawn trying to grow up and figure out her place now. Now that she is just like a normal kid again. Now that the key stuff is over with Glory. But then we get to the big bad, which is the trio, which I absolutely hate. Again, I just find that for Jonathan to get that great development that we see and him give that award to Buffy at the prom, I think Jonathan, it's one of the sweetest arcs in season 3, only for them to just make him just a stick in the mud here, just make him a pain in our asses with Warren, who again, I don't really like Warren very much. I get we're not supposed to like them, they're the villains, but even like Glory, like you love to hate Glory because she's such a fun personality. You love Glory, and same with Angel or Angelus. It's like it's Angel, so obviously you're invested because of what it means for the story. Whereas the trio, it just feels kind of random. Also because I think the third guy isn't really very prominent beforehand. I mean, not to say Jonathan and Warren are either, but like, I don't know. I just never really liked the trio, but really the big bad, if you look at the season as a whole, is Dark Willow. And I think that is a much more successful storyline than the trio storyline. And of course, the trio storyline propels the Dark Willow stuff. But I need to talk about Seeing Red for a sec, because I did complain, of course, about how I hate how they just put Tara as a main character in the credits just to pull the wool over her eyes. And I just think it's a really cheap gimmick. But I also don't like it because they're finally happy again, and then she's stripped away from us. And I know that is the effect. We are meant to feel the death even more because they had just gotten back together. But maybe give them 2 or 3 episodes together. I know the suddenness is for the impact, is for the shock value, but as someone who binged it, it almost feels like Tara's story was just short-lived and that she was only here to service, again, Dark Willow's storyline. It wasn't about Tara's story. It was about Willow's story, which I get. Willow is one of the main characters, but especially if you're going to add her to the main title and pretend she's part of the group and finally recognize her as a part of the group, the creator, it is very unfortunate, though, to see that she is so short-lived in the series, and that really, as soon as she dies, Willow's dark, and then it keeps moving. We don't really get the closure that we get in something like The Body, where we spend a whole episode quite literally with Joyce's corpse. Like, we don't get a lot of moment with Tara after her death. She's just dead, and then that's it, which is very hard to see. And of course, we also have Hell's Bells, which I mentioned is probably my least favorite episode because of Anya, because she is, spoiler alert, my favorite character in the series. I absolutely adore Anya. So to see Anya cry and feel so much pain, especially at the hands of my least favorite character, Xander, it is quite literally the hardest hour of television I have to watch. Even I don't want to say more so than The Body because it's so different, but The Body, at least I can appreciate the artistic merit of that episode and be like, wow, like the way this is shot and acted is so good. And it's very well shot and very well acted, Hell's Bells, but it's kind of like that episode Scott's Tots of The Office, where you're watching this train wreck happen, this train crash happen. You just kind of have to look between your eyes and say, oh no, here it comes. And I think it's just one of those just very difficult to watch moments because I'm so invested in Anya. And I think she's done so much growth. She's a character that I feel like is over-serviced in a good way, whereas like Tara, I feel like is underdeveloped. I feel like, Anya is very well developed, and they still give her this really sad ending to her relationship. But I do think her and Xander should not be together because I don't think they work together. I think Xander's kind of mean to her a lot of the time. So I'm not upset that they broke up. I'm just upset it had to happen this way. It's always hard to watch anyone get left at the altar, and it happens in every freaking show. Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Grey's Anatomy. Oh my God, Grey's Anatomy is even worse than this. Like, I don't know what everyone's obsession is with leaving people at the altar. It's just one of the worst story plots that every show goes through, and it is obviously impactful because obviously I'm having this reaction to it, but it's tough. It's tough to watch. It's very sad to watch. It's very hard to watch. And then also the rape scene with Spike and Buffy. Now, he doesn't actually rape her. He obviously is stopped before he does, but it's one of those things where I get what they're trying to say because Spike ultimately is a villain still, and he does have that evil side inside of him, and it's all about how afterwards he's able to finally get his soul back, and it's supposed to be a commentary. But I do think they could have had him do something that wasn't necessarily sexual assault, and we still would have understood the concept. I think the fact that they go that mile and go for the sexual assault, it almost makes it hard to redeem him, harder than anything else. Like, even if he had just like hit her, it would have been bad, but like, I don't know. I think it's because Buffy's so powerful that you can't just have him hit her and run away. Like, I think it needed to be something grand and big and terrible. But I just think when you bring sexual assault and rape into it takes things to a different level. And I know it's all to service this overall growth arc for Spike, but I think it's just harder for any character, no matter the circumstances, no matter the character, no matter the powers and the amount of evil inside them. I think it's always hard to overcome that. And it's just hard to watch. It's just not pleasant to watch. But we finally get into the final season of the show, which is season 7. Which I like more than I love, only because I think it is kind of winding things down. It is kind of acknowledging that this is the end, so it doesn't really give us a ton of new stuff. It kind of just resolves all the old stuff. Obviously, Anya has this really great episode in Selfless. It's actually one of my top 10 episodes where, we kind of see her backstory, and we also kind of understand why she is the way she is and what she needs in life and kind of how she thinks and her philosophy on things, which I think is important. And it also is, I think, one of the more effective Scooby Gang fights because I think Xander and Buffy have good arguments where Buffy is basically like, well, I had to kill Angel, so, like, how is this different? Now that it's your girlfriend, I'm not allowed to kill her. And I think it's a very interesting kind of conflict that they have, the Scooby Gang. It's kind of the last great fight because later in the season we get this big fight where the Scooby Gang quite literally kicks Buffy out of her own house, which I always thought was a little weird. So I think that fight in Selfless about Anya is a lot more impactful because it's dealing with quite literally a friend. Like, Buffy is Anya's friend, and Buffy acknowledges that, but it's also like she has a duty as a Slayer, and Anya even says, I wouldn't expect her not to kill me. And I think the fact that they're able to resolve that is very nice because I love Anya and I don't want to see her die, which This season let me down at the end there. But I do think it's very interesting how they're able to kind of bring that storyline to full fruition. And also, Drew Goddard wrote that storyline, which is really, really awesome. I love Drew Goddard's work. So to see him bring Anya's story to light is quite beautiful because I'm a fan of his. But as the season goes on, it's really more about Spike learning how to just accept the fact that he has a soul again and learn how to do good, which I think is a good redemption arc. I think Spike has a very good redemption arc. You know, that one blip of the sexual assault is really tough to stomach, but I think they do a really good job in doing the best they can to redeem him over a short period of time, because 22 episodes, it is a lot of episodes, but given that you sit down and watch 144 episodes in total, 22 of them is still a small percentage. So the fact that we're able to go on this full journey with Spike in just a season is really, really cathartic and really amazing. But also, I love what they do with Buffy's character, being this kind of role model. She essentially becomes kind of like Harry Potter in Order of the Phoenix, where he starts, training, this almost new generation, even though it is his classmates in Harry Potter. In this sense, it's her literally training this new generation of slayers and wholeheartedly believing that a slayer doesn't have to just be one, because that's a whole dictated by man. It's a rule written by man about women, and why should we let men dictate women's stories, which is a little hypocritical given the amount of male writers on the show. But I get the overall sentiment. I think it's a beautiful sentiment, the idea that like we can write our own history. And I love how the story resolves with her having a bunch of slayers, and also for Buffy's sake, the fact that she can finally rest now, having been through all this, and now being able to finally rest and let these other slayers kind of fill her shoes and fill that void, while she can still also be a guider, a person, a leader for her. I just think it's a really, really beautiful way to end this series. Now, do we lose some people I love in the finale? Yes, we do. Anya's death, I think, is a little unceremonious, and it's very tough. And I do feel for Xander in that moment where he asks, and he hears that she was amazing in her final moments. I would have liked to see that. I feel like her moment just kind of comes and goes. I like how Faith comes back, and her relationship to Mr. Wood, who reminded me, as I saw Mr. Wood, I was like, why is this cast so white? And it's one of those things where I think if they were to make this series nowadays, they would not let this slide. But like the fact that Mr. Wood is the first main black character in the series and he doesn't come until season 7, it's a bit of a problem. But I also really like the Spike sacrifice. It's hard to watch. It's sad to watch. And I know he comes back in Angel, so like maybe it's not final. And it's kind of the MCU problem of like, well, is anyone truly dead? But I really do like that final sacrifice and that final I love you moment. What I don't like though is the Angel return. I think it's a little unnecessary. I think it was for Buffy fans to have that closure with Angel. But I think when his show is still going on, just let him be in his own show. I just feel like him coming back to kiss her only to aid Spike's storyline. Like I feel like it could have ended the same way without that closure. But maybe Buffy needed that closure. Maybe she needed the closure with Angel to realize she did love Spike. But if Spike's going to die anyway, I mean, who's to say she might not just go back to Angel? I don't know. But I really just could have done without Angel in the finale there, also because I'm just not the biggest fan. But overall, I think they ended it in a very good way. I think they showed how Willow could use her powers for good. Again, at the beginning of season 7 kind of deals with the fallout of the previous season and how Willow's able to kind of control her magic, and then eventually decides to abandon it altogether, only to be able to kind of use it for good at the end. It's all about how these people use their strengths for good. Willow uses her magic in a positive way. Anya finally, deals with this whole idea of not living forever and being human and being mortal in actually sacrificing her life for the cause. Buffy, who has always been about being the one, and that alienating her from her friends, is able to instead make the Slayer a communal thing and make it that anyone could be a Slayer. It's very Last Jedi, but you all aren't ready to have that conversation. But that's exactly what Rian Johnson was getting at with The Last Jedi, and so many people hated it. But guess what? They do the same thing in Buffy, and it rules here in Buffy, and it rules in The Last Jedi. I've said my piece, but I really just think they really wrap it up in a very nice way. Xander becomes a great babysitter to Dawn, only for Dawn to one-up him, which is very fun to see. I feel bad for his eye, but again, that felt a little unnecessary. But I think it's a very satisfying ending. I think it really is kind of where the season should have gone. I didn't necessarily know where it was going to go. Like I said, I knew certain moments were going to happen when they were happening. I knew Willow was going to be gay, and I knew that Joyce was gonna die, but I didn't necessarily know. I knew Dawn was coming into it, but I didn't know how they were gonna introduce her to the story, and I really liked discovering that for myself. I knew that Willow was gay, but I didn't know that her Tara's death would result in this darker Willow storyline. I didn't even know Buffy would die a second time after season one. So there were a lot of things that were surprising or really exciting for me to see, and I think even having known what was happening and then rewatching it again for a second and third time, I was able to just find so many more the intricacies, find all the intricate parts of it, and just being able to enjoy all the little details, and then also be critical about it, because I think, again, like I said, the reason why this show is so beloved is because it hits so many highs, but in order to truly appreciate the highs, you have to also acknowledge the lows. So if I offended anyone, I am sorry. This was just my honest opinion on Buffy, but I can say wholeheartedly that I really did love it. It really is such a great show. I think it is mostly due to the strength of the characters. I think because you care about the characters so much and you are invested in their relationships, that is really the strength that the show is built on. The mythology is fun, but you see mythology in a bunch of shows like this. It is the marriage of the mythology with the real life stuff that makes it as special as it is. And the schlocky style of it doesn't make it a product of its time, but makes it the product of its time. And I really just think this is one of those shows that I can definitely see why it got a cult classic following. I can definitely see why people love it, and why it's so enjoyed, and why it has become so enjoyed for decades to come by so many people since. There's a reason they made seasons 8 through 12 after this, because they just needed more and more Buffy, because it really is such a great show. And eventually, when I get around to seasons 8 through 12, I will review that. I've never reviewed a comic book on this channel, but I want to review that, and I want to watch Angel, and I want to review Angel. Like, this has made me become a Buffy fan and become invested in it. And now I'm excited to talk to my friends about it. And I know I kind of, played a little trick on them, and, they didn't know I was watching it this whole time, because I finished watching this a long time ago as well. Because, like I said, I watched this in preparation to go work with Larry Bagby on set. In Band on the Run. So I kind of completed most of the series by then. So I've been watching the series now and rewatching it for almost a whole year now. And it has been so lovely to just kind of immerse myself in it and feel like I've become one with these characters. It feels like Harry Potter in that way, where I feel like I grew up with them, even though I watched it all between the ages of 25 and 26. But I really do feel like I got to see the growth, because it's great in television and in movie series like Harry Potter that you're able to see them at their youngest and their oldest. And then when you finish that last episode in season 7, going back to season 1 and seeing them at their youngest, it's something I love to do in Glee as well, where the last episode of Glee ends and then you put on the first one just to see the juxtaposition. And it is really great to see how far Buffy came from that little show that was just this fun kind of series spinoff of a movie, which I also haven't seen. Maybe I'll watch the movie and review the movie on here. But like this really great spinoff that was going to be kind of fun and for all the kids and some adults, and then ended up becoming so much bigger and so much grander and so much more spectacular. And because I have so many great friends that I know love the show and love talking about the show, I figured I'm going to make it all Buffy all year long. Next month in June, I am going to be doing a Buffy draft day. And because there are 7 seasons, heck, I'm having 7 panelists. Myself, Matt, Stacy, Chad, Carrie, JD, Carly, all 7 of us are going to be drafting Buffy stuff. That's right. We'll be drafting a main character, a recurring character, a big bad, a couple, and a episode. It's going to be a great time, and I'm very excited. They don't know this because they're watching this live, but that will be happening in June, because I just have Buffy on the brain, and I can't wait to talk about it some more with some experts who can probably better articulate what I have been saying for the past hour and a half. But also, I have been waiting to start my Sopranos podcast on my podcast, Ranked Up This Morning. But as soon as Ranked Up This Morning ends, where I'll be ranking every single episode of The Sopranos, I am going to watch Buffy a 4th time and do Buffy the Ranking Slayer or Buffy the Vampire Ranker. I'm not sure which one. Vote in the live chat if you like Buffy the Vampire Ranker or Buffy the Ranking Slayer better. But I will be doing that as my second rendition of episode rankings on the channel as well, or on the podcast, I should say. So it's going to be a big Buffy year and a big Buffy lifetime, because I'm going to be watching the show more and more. I do love the show. And again, disclaimer, I don't love the creator, but look how much I was able to talk about how many amazing things I loved about the show in an hour and a half, and not even have to bring up his name once. It's just such a beautiful thing that we can still have the art, because so many other artists worked on it and made it as great as it could be. I mean, just so many great episodes that aren't even written by the creator, but just also brought to life by so many great actors. And I just want to give a shout out to all of them one more time, just because they are so amazing. I mean, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Nicholas Brendan, Emma Caulfield, Michelle Trachtenberg, James Marsters, Allison Hannigan, Anthony Stewart Head, Charisma Carpenter, David Boreanaz. I mean, all of them have brought so much. Christine Sutherland have brought so much to these roles and these characters, and I think the characters are the one and first and foremost reason why the show works so much. And Eliza Dushku, oh my god, she's so good. Nathan Fillion, Joel Grey is in this thing. I mean, there's so many great characters, so many great actors. Hinton Battle, wow, I mean, so many great. Glory, Claire Kramer, the Master, Mark Metcalf, the Master. Remember the Master? So many great characters, so many great actors. This is almost the amount of time I have for this slate, this slot. But I did want to leave you right before I go with my top 10 episodes, because I did narrow it down to 10. It was very difficult, but here are, to end this video, my top 10 Buffy episodes. Number 10, Something Blue. There's just something fun about everything Willow's saying being taken super literally. I think Giles losing his vision is so fun to see. It's sad to see, but it's also very fun to see because the actor's playing so well with it. Anthony Head is playing with the vision loss very well, and it's also the first we see of Spike and Buffy, and it actually shows us that they have a lot of chemistry, believe it or not. And number 9, got Doppelganger Land. Again, another one where it's like great foreshadowing for something to come later with Willow, but also just seeing Allison Hannigan dig into that darker stuff is really fun. At 8, Once More the Feeling. It's a great episode. It's not one of my favorites, but it is in my top 10. It's just such a unique one, and I love rewatching it. Number 7, Selfless. This is my favorite character, Anya. So for the fact that she gets her own spotlight episode, and that it results in probably the most the most gravity of a Scooby battle fight, a verbal fight between the Scoobies, with Xander and Buffy kind of discussing the moral dilemmas of whether to kill Anya or not. It really makes for one of the best hours of television. At number 6, Graduation Day. Great way to end season 3. It feels like it could have been a finale in and of itself. At number 5, Becoming, which is kind of the first time where I was truly like, this is a great show. Like, that was the first instinct where I was like, you know what, this is where I get the hype, and I think this is why it's so amazing, and I get it. I get the hype. Number 4, Who Are You? Just the body swap is so good. Also bringing Faith back for one last hurrah before the finale is so good, before we'd see her again in the finale. And number 3, I said it earlier, The Prom. I just love how it shows the student appreciation for Buffy, because this is also an end of an era in a way, being the end of this high school era. It's so beautiful to see. At number 2, The Body, just one of the best episodes of television ever. And number 1, Hush, my favorite episode of Buffy ever. So there you go, top 10 episodes. That's all I got for you. I have so much more to say, I'm sure, as I will do on my ranking podcast, and as I will do in the draft day with 7 drafters this time, because hey, we're bending the rules. We're bending it like Beckham. That's all I can say right now. Thank you so much. Up next is an episode of Picture This 1982 with Chad and Carrie. If you are watching the subathon, please continue to like, subscribe. Please grow those subscriptions more and more and more. I know I pre-taped this Buffy video because I wanted to make it perfect, but I'm sure people have been liking and subscribing and chatting away. So please continue to do so as we head into the very late night hours. If you're watching this separate from the subathon, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more reviews on the channel. And that's it, guys. We're leaving the Hellmouth. Thanks so much. Yay, we watched Buffy. Woo!